I'm JP Tuesday.
And I'm Kiki Cannon. As lifelong Disney fans, the work of countless talented Disney creatives have shaped our lives.
Now, as the Disney catalog expands, we're taking a journey through film and television to discover if that spark that shaped us as children lives on in adulthood.
Does your favorite Disney media still cast that same spell? Join us as we find out. We are Rewatching the Magic.
Hi, Kiki.
Hi, Tuesday.
This week, we are taking our first dive into the Herbie franchise with the first film in the series, The Love Bug from 1968. It's very interesting how much this little VW bug has become kind of associated with Disney in that regard. And it's interesting that as of now, as of 2026, there are 5 theatrically released Herbie movies, 1 made-for-TV movie, and I didn't know this until I looked it up, a 5-episode TV series.
I didn't know about the TV series. That's information to me.
Yeah, Herbie the Love Bug aired in 1982 on CBS, and Dean Jones actually came back, reprising his character for the TV show. Yeah. So it's and Herbie kind of became kind of a regular character for a while. If you go to like Disney on Ice or anything like that, they would have Herbie as a character. I don't know if you could actually meet Herbie in the parks as a character, but I believe that you can actually, there is a replica of the Herbie car at one of the Florida resorts. I don't know which one of it is off the top of my head.
Well, okay, let's just get it out of the way. We're going to be comparing this to Cars so much. I know it. But when I was at Disneyland, Lightning McQueen rolled right past me, as a meet and greet. I was very good. I did not punch the car. I know that Herbie is kind of like a throwback character right now because when did the last movie come out? Early 2000s sometimes?
Yeah, 2005. Herbie Fully Loaded, the Lindsay Lohan movie, that was 2005. So that was 20 years ago.
Yeah. So, I mean, right now, as far as like kids going to the parks, I don't think Herbie would be their jam,
Mm-hmm.
But, there's like a certain breed of Disney adult, I think, that might enjoy that. And if they ever want to revive the series, heaven forbid, with all the kind of new animatronics and stuff now, you could make a, kind of in the same way that they've done a lot of the bots for the Star Wars, the Galaxy's Edge. And they could have like, hidden puppeteer cast members in the back, moving the hood of the car or flashing the lights in response to things people say, or, to make it seem like Herbie is sentient and interacting with various, it might not be a full-size Herbie. I mean, the Lightning McQueen that goes around Disneyland isn't a full-size car, and it's escorted by cast members, but I don't see why you couldn't do the same with Herbie and then add, the Lightning McQueen is kind of mostly static in the sense that it rolls along, it kind of just seems like it's an RC car, and it says voice lines that seem pre-recorded, somebody's cueing them from somewhere, or maybe they just play on an automatic loop. I don't know. I think maybe there's like a screen where the eyes blink or something. I don't know. But my point is that the Lightning McQueen is like barely a character, it's more like a giant RC car. But with the upgrades they've done recently with stuff that they've worked on with Galaxy's Edge, I don't see why they couldn't make a version of Herbie that kind of either is a sort of smaller version, although VW bugs are small enough that you could probably just drive one around the park at a full-size scale. But, you could scale it down a little bit if you had to. and, escort it the way that the bots are escorted or that Lightning McQueen is escorted, and kind of puppeteer it. Because you don't have to worry about voice lines with Herbie, It would just be kind of little things like moving the hood or flashing the lights or maybe some windshield wipers or so, just little things to make it look like the car is responding to what you say.
Mhm.
And I think that for Disney, that's very doable if they ever want to do something like that with the franchise again. It would be very interested to see because I'm really into what they're doing now with these kind of quote unquote free roaming characters, like they're doing with the Olaf in Disney Paris. I don't know how much you've seen of those videos.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've also seen like the baby Groot or toddler Groot animatronic they had like a couple years back.
Yeah, and they're doing a lot better with like the quote unquote free roaming characters in the park, the ones that have the hidden puppeteers and, the less conspicuous cast members escorting them around. But I just love that kind of upgrade in technology rather than having like, you go sit in your boat on the Pirates of the Caribbean and there's animatronics and they're kind of standing in one place and they're very interesting, but it's one thing to kind of like here sit in this ride or even, as blown away as I was when I got to go on Rise of the Resistance, which I think is still the pinnacle of Disney tech right now as far as rides in the park. A lot of those are still fairly static animatronics. They're top of the line ones, but they are kind of at a distance as you are shuffled through a ride environment. But what they're doing with the kind of free roaming characters, I find absolutely fascinating.
You mentioned Cars, and apparently there was some plan to put Herbie in the Cars world in some capacity. Apparently there was an idea to put Herbie as a cameo in Cars 3, but that never happened. He did end up making a cameo in a Cars comic, but that's about it. And
Well,
I believe Herbie has shown up in a couple of Disney racing games, and because of course, why not?
the interesting thing is that I think I said last week that I hadn't seen this movie since I was a little kid. And maybe I did watch it when I was like an extremely little kid. But in watching it for the rewatch, I realized that I did not remember a single freaking thing about this movie.
Same. And I think that all of the other Herbies kind of congealed in my memory bank watching them on the Disney Channel. So I'm remembering scenes from the other films. Like there's a part of the movie where Buddy Hackett says they're going to Monte Carlo. It's like, wait, don't they go to Monte Carlo? Oh no, that's a different movie.
Yeah, I think that what I was having in my brain was that I've seen clips before of the Herbie movies throughout the years, and I think I've just seen clips from random movies, and my brain kind of went, well, you've seen so many clips that obviously you have seen an entire movie. And it turns out, no, I hadn't. Because as I started watching this movie, and other than the occasional like random scene, I was like, none of this is familiar to me. And then like one scene would happen and I'd be like, oh yeah, I remember this like one very specific thing. And by the end of the movie, I was like, I think I just saw like a bunch of clips in like random Disney documentaries or whatever over the years. And my brain kind of mushed them all together like that.
Yeah. It's possible. Again, a lot of them follow the same formula. It's just we gotta win the big race. That's literally like the plot of every Herbie movie is we gotta win the big race.
Well, okay. It's not that I'm against movies without like deep plot, I mean, one of my favorite movie series is John Wick, and that is like, what is it now? Like 5 movies, including spin-offs and like a TV show. And it's just based on like somebody hurt my dog and now I'm gonna make the entire world pay for it. Like, there's no plot to that. You know, it's enough plot for like maybe 30 minutes of one movie, and they've stretched it over like 5 movies in a TV show. But this movie really does not have a plot. What it has is montage. Gotta have a montage. Montage.
And a lot of slapstick. A lot of slapstick.
Yeah, and it's not really top-notch slapstick either, because a lot of the slapstick revolves around the use of green screen and stuff. And even for the 60s, I sent you this like before recording when I was just watching it, because I was so like stunned by it. I was like, even for the 60s, these effects are crap. It's not just that they don't hold up now. We've watched movies from this same time period, from this same company, and it's way better done. I mean, it's the two main characters literally live in a painting. They couldn't even bother to build a set for the main guy's house exterior. They just use a matte painting and have them like drive up on green screen to the world's most obvious matte painting.
Like, some of the wide shots look all right when it's like putting a matte painting on top of an existing building in a few shots. It looks pretty decent, but when the entire building is a matte painting, doesn't really work.
Yeah, the entire scene with the bear, which we'll get to later, I'm sure. But I'm just going to say right now, the entire scene with the bear may be some of the worst effects I've ever seen in any Disney movie ever. Like, just ever.
And the repeated use of speeding up the footage to make, number one, the cars go faster, and number two, to make it look like Herbie has a personality.
Yeah.
Like, we don't even get an origin of why Herbie is the way he is. Like, how did this car gain sentience? We get a sort of explanation like 9/10 into the movie where Dean Jones is kind of wondering, people love their cars, and I guess this car decided to love back.
Well, we do get kind of an earlier explanation with Buddy Hackett's character where he's like, humans, we had our shot, and now like something else is evolving behind us.
So what you're saying is Herbie is more than meets the eye.
That was bad. That was bad.
That will not be the last reference I make to that series in this podcast.
Unfortunately not, and for good reason. Just real quick, since we've already mentioned a couple of the people, let's just go over the cast real quick because they're almost all people we've talked about before. Let's just name drop them real quick.
Mention Dean Jones. We've talked about Dean Jones a while. He's been in many Disney movies, especially in this era.
I mean, he was the go-to guy for Disney in this era. He was their leading man.
Dean Jones plays our hero, Jim Douglas, the owner of Herbie. David Tomlinson, who we've talked about a couple of times already. Again, he was a regular in 60s Disney movies.
You best remember him for being the father, George Banks, in Mary Poppins, and I'm going to keep calling him Mr. Banks throughout this entire thing. But we also talked about him when we talked about Bed Knobs and Broomsticks, and I think we've talked about a couple of the other movies he was into.
He basically plays the same character in every one of these Disney movies. It just happens to be the motivations either happen to be heroic or villainous depending on the situation. But it's the same character, the same character. It really is. So calling him Mr. Banks is not wrong.
Yeah, I mean, he did get very much typecast. This is just, what if Mr. Banks was into car racing instead of banking?
For record, his character's name is Mr. Thorndike, an evil car owner, car dealership. Yeah.
And fellow racer. This is, I don't know, it's a prequel to Cars. I actually wanted to message you and be like, this is your revenge for me not letting us do Cars. Like, you made me watch the prequel to Cars.
Well, if Buddy Hackett is saying that cars are evolving into sentient creatures, then... Yeah.
Well, then we know how we got the Cars universe, because that's never explained either. So it might as well be this.
Yeah.
Speaking of Buddy Hackett.
Yeah, Buddy Hackett plays Tennessee Steinmetz, Jim's best friend, an artist who creates art with car parts, much to Jim's chagrin. When we first meet him in the movie, his latest masterpiece is done using Jim's own car.
Yeah, he completely disassembles Jim's Edsel, and I mean, no big loss, but he completely disassembles Jim's Edsel and turns it into actually a rather cool statue.
He's also this wannabe guru who's
I don't
traveled.
think he wants to be a guru. I think he was just a takeoff of the hippy dippy kind of types that you got at the time, where it was like, yeah, I dropped out for a while and went to Tibet and talked to some swamis or whatever, and now I'm enlightened.
He does say that he spent some time in China teaching English.
Well, yeah, but he specifically mentions like having studied with swamis. He mentions going to Tibet at one point. I mean, he goes through the whole thing. And at one point, Jim does say that Tennessee is straight off a flying saucer. In other words, he is not all there.
Yeah.
He's very much a woo-woo type, and he's the first one to suggest that Herbie might not be just a normal car.
Michelle Lee plays Carol, who originally starts out as Mr. Thorndyke's assistant and also a mechanic in her own right, and then eventually becomes Jim's love interest.
Yeah.
I mean, a race car driver falling in love with a mechanic makes sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we've talked about Michelle Lee before.
I believe this is her only Disney movie.
Yeah, she was really best known for, I mean, at least to like, you know, people of a certain age, I suppose. I mean, I say was, as of recording, she's still with us. I'm not trying to like, you know, do anything prematurely here. But, you know, like growing up, my parents would watch Knots Landing and stuff, and she was on that. So that's kind of like where I would, but if you're, you know, kind of like Tuesday and Me and your Broadway fan, she also was Madame Morrible in Wicked in the 2015 run. So, I mean, that's like how recently she's been working. So, good for her.
Yeah. She had a more, you know, mostly known, at least when this movie came out, she was mostly known as a stage actor.
Yeah.
How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying and stuff like that.
Yeah, but she then went on to be like, for a long time, she was like, oh, hey, it's her on like TV shows. And then she got on Knots Landing and it was like, oh, let's do hundreds of episodes of Knots Landing.
Yeah, it was like Love Bow, Fantasy Island, Love American Style, stuff like that.
Yeah. I will give her credit. As harsh as I'm going to be on this film, she is really good in the part, and she's fun to watch.
Yeah, because I like the fact that this character is able to match the sass of Dean Jones. Like, those two really just match each other's wit, and I like it. It makes them a believable couple.
I don't really think we talked about it when we talked about That Darn Cat, but I'm not saying this to put Dean Jones down at all, because I don't think it's his fault. But in these movies, and I think it's the time period and the writing, the way his characters, his leading men were written, they are written in this certain way that I think in the 60s and 70s when he's doing these movies, it probably came off as like confident man about town who, you know, goes his own way and does his own thing, you know. And now it kind of comes across as like smarmy and weird and borderline unlikable just because of the changing culture.
Yeah, I feel it. You know, this is what a confident man acts like in late 60s versus this is what an insecure man would act in 2026. But
well, I mean, I think if we're being fair, it's what an insecure man would act like in the 60s. They just didn't have the terms for it yet.
Yeah, but also this is late 1960s Disney. This is right at the beginning of what many call the what would Walt do era. Walt's
Oh, yeah.
dead. Walt's dead, and the company is making movies that they think a dead man would like.
And
let's be real. Yeah.
they got it wrong more often than they got it right, as we have discussed before.
Yeah.
But when you talk about how she's able to match him, I think that's the reason I like her so much, is that because of the cultural difference in the time period, and watching it now with like our current viewpoint, she seems like so much more progressive even
Like this
than
is
she probably did then.
This is smack dab in the middle of the women's liberation movement. So
Oh, yeah.
Disney making a very confident woman that, you know, she can wear a business suit, but she's not afraid to put on a pair of coveralls, pop open the hood, and go work on a car, which for the 60s would be very progressive.
Wait, are you suggesting that Disney has gone woke?
Oh no.
But yeah, I mean, as far as the characters go, like there are a lot of things in this movie, and we talked about it off mic, and I'm just gonna get it out of the way. I think both of us were surprised that this movie did not come with one of those like racial sensitivity things.
Yeah, let's get that. Kind of gets us into our next actor, Benson Fong as Mr. Wu, the sort of savior of the movie. He ends up due to Herbie's shenanigans, he ends up wrecking a Chinese restaurant owned by Mr. Wu, and turns out he's a big car buff guy, and he ends up becoming part of the team. And Buddy Hackett doing really, really bad fake Chinese.
I'm not even sure that was fake Chinese, because I recognized some of the words. I mean, my ability to speak Chinese has gone down a lot since I took it formally, but I recognized some of the things, and what Benson Fong was saying was, Chinese, so far as
I would have
I could
liked some
tell.
subtitle. I would have liked some subtitles,
But
we don't
the
get
thing
that.
is, I think they may have given Buddy Hackett like sort of a phonetic, like toneless, bit of Chinese, and then was like, and ham it up while you do this, which made it even worse. But like, I could catch a few words here and there, and I was like, I think that's what he's probably trying to say. I don't think, I mean, I am willing to be corrected. Please, if you are a native Chinese speaker, speak up. It does sound like they gave him some kind of phonetic thing, and then he just added his Buddy Hackett, hamminess on top of it, and it's
plus
basically intelligible.
Because he also has that bit of a lisp in his voice and his lip curled up. So trying to have that and have it, I mean, even if it was real Chinese, it's you're right, kind of borderline incomprehensible.
Yeah. I don't think we talked about it before when we talked about him in any of the other movies we've discussed with him, but like, that was legitimately from him having palsy, which I mean, I'm not saying, but like, it was one of those things, like there are some actors who just like their disability kind of helps their shtick, and he was one of those guys that took that part of it and worked it into his comedy and worked it into, and they even kind of make a joke about it in the movie, because as you said, he mentioned that I used to teach English in China, and the cop he says that to says, "You taught somebody English?" And he was like, "Hey, you don't have to get mean about it, because of his, thick New York accent and, a bit of a slur and everything. But it just came from him having palsy when he was a kid, and it left him partially paralyzed on that side of his face, and that's why he's got that, that kind of that look to his face and the bit of a lisp and the, whatever. But it made him distinctive, and he worked it into his comedy routine and into his acting and made it work for him.
Buddy Hackett has a very distinct voice. He doesn't need to put on a funny voice. He just needs to talk. I mean, that's why Scuttle sounds the way he does in Little Mermaid. That is just Buddy Hackett.
Yeah.
Last of the main actors, Joe Flynn as Havershaw, Thorndike's little lackey, his flunky. At this point in his career, Joe Flynn would probably be best well known from the TV show McHale's Navy. So you watch McHale's Navy on TV, and then you go to the theater and you see him in The Love Bug.
Or if you were like me and didn't watch McHale's Navy, but you did watch Batman a lot, the Adam West Batman, he was all over the Adam West Batman. I don't know how much you watched the Adam West Batman, either growing up or as an adult, but I watched the crap out of the Adam West Batman when I was a kid, and this guy showed up in a bunch of episodes. So I never watched McHale's Navy, but I recognize him from Batman. He did a lot of other Disney stuff too.
Yeah. Yeah, he was also one of those, regular actors for Disney during this era.
I will say that we do have a couple of interesting kind of things depending on how big you are into certain areas of entertainment and or sports. But they do have a couple of announcers that show up in this during the car chases. And one of them is a pretty young Gary Owens.
Yeah, I was going to hold up and wait and talk about him later. But yeah, Gary Owens, young Gary Owens, as one of the sportscasters in the movie. And that distinctive voice he has, that you cannot mistake him for anyone else.
Yeah, and depending on your age and your taste in media, you either know him as the announcer from Laugh-In, or you know him as the original voice on Space Ghost, or you know him as Roger Ramjet. I mean, this man was everywhere, and it was kind of weird to see him in this.
There's an entire generation. I will say this line, and you know who I'm talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, Garfield and friends!
Yeah. I mean, the man is also Powdered Toast Man. Come on.
Yeah.
I mean, he had such an insane career. I mean, like, everything was kind of a banger, you know?
Yeah.
But it was so weird to see him in this. I was like, wait, is that who I think it is? It sounds like him. But he was so young, and he didn't really have that, like, distinctive mustache that you got used to seeing, like, in the Laugh-In days. But, and then moving on, the other one is Chick Hearn, who, depending on your, the kind of media you watch, if you're a sports fan, you'll know him because he was a, sportscaster, incredibly famous sportscaster, for decades. So, mainly in the California area, mainly with the LA Lakers. So apparently he is even the guy that, like, is the reason that Magic Johnson got drafted. Like, apparently he saw Magic Johnson play and, like, advised the owner of the team to draft him. He was like, that guy's gonna be a star.
And he was right.
Yeah, I mean, but anyway, so, it was, since they were, set in California, the whole thing set in California, mostly in San Francisco, but of course, filmed in the LA area. They got Chick Hearn to be one of their racing sports announcers.
Yeah. So let's kind of get into what this movie is about. As I mentioned, Dean Jones plays race car driver Jim Douglas, and he kind of sucks at being a race car driver. The opening sequence is not even a race. It's a demolition derby. And on one hand, it does set the tone for the movie, but if this is going to be a racing movie, why are we doing a demolition derby at the beginning of the movie and not a proper race? But I guess we need a reason for Jim to not have a car.
Well, they don't really get into it. At least it wasn't super clear to me. So let me know if I missed something. But when, in one of the early conversations between Jim and Carol, when she kind of puts together who he is, and she's like, oh, you're that Jim Douglas. And they have that conversation. She's like, you crashed, this car in this race, and you spun this car out into a tree in that race, and you spun that car into a fence in that race, and she just goes through, like, all of his recent failures. I have a feeling that, like, the idea was that he had failed out of all the, like, legit, like, racing stuff, and So he was like, okay, I'm just going to try to like enter a demolition derby and try to get some quick cash. But the movie doesn't make it super clear. But that was kind of the vibe that I got.
And like Buddy Hackett is telling him, like, dude, you are going to die if you keep on doing this. Because he comes home, his face is all scratched up from the crash. It's like, you know, you should get a 9 to 5. Hey, there's a garage that's hiring. You know, if you keep doing these races, these demolition derbies, you are going to die. And you should, you know, not do that. And he's like, I'm not a mechanic. I'm a driver. So he has that passion. He wants to be behind the wheel.
Well, I'm not sure if it's so much passion as like, I don't know, borderline narcissism, maybe?
I mean, the breakdown he has right at towards the end of the movie when he realizes he's not actually that good a driver. It hasn't been him winning the races. It's been Herbie driving himself.
Yeah, the thing is that he, Tennessee gives him good advice, sort of, where he's like, hey, find a different line of work before you get yourself killed. And I am just going to pause here for a minute because you talk about him coming back from the demolition derby all banged up and everything. Not only are the special effects for this bad, but the makeup is bad as well. Not the beauty makeup, because Carol looks gorgeous. Like, Michelle Lee, beautiful. Flawless. Even when she shouldn't be. Like, they're in the middle of, like, a rough and tumble, 2-day, race at the end. And she has that, like, all of her makeup is perfectly done. Her bouffant is bouffantin', like, she's rocking it. And I'm like, maybe you should be a little grimy and maybe have, like, a couple of strands of hair out of place. I don't know. But the makeup, when anybody is supposed to be, like, injured or dirty or, like they've been working on a car and they've got grease on them or something, like, it's always like, I do a lot of community theater, and I'm like, I have been in community theater productions where it's like somebody's first production and they've done better makeup than this movie. Like, he comes home from the demolition derby and he's supposed to have like this gash on his chin or his jaw, and it looks like his like toddler was playing with finger paints and got some red paint on his jaw. And I was like, I can't tell if that's supposed to be an injury or like he got some like paint from one of the other cars on him or like whatever. And then he shows up the next day with like a giant bandage on his jaw, and I was like, I guess that was supposed to be like a horrific injury, but it really just looks like, a toddler with a crayon scribbled on his jaw.
So yeah, and he tries to get a new car, but he's flat broke. So he goes to this car dealership, which is owned by Mr. Thorndike here. And it's
Mr.
like,
Banks, we're calling him Mr. Banks. He's playing Mr. Banks.
yeah. And it's like Jim saying, hey, yeah, I have no money, so could you give me a car for cheap? And Mr. Banks here is insulted. How dare you come into this fine establishment where I sell these quality, top-of-the-line British cars, and you come and insult me? And this is where Herbie comes in, because Herbie is being returned by the previous owner because the car has been acting up. How dare... And Mr. Banks here, he is just getting, how dare you bring this ugly car into my showroom? How dare... We don't sell these cars. Why is this here?
Because it's... Okay, so the story is that, like, a rich woman came in to buy a luxury car from Mr. Banks. And as part of the deal, she says, you have to find my maid, like, a cheap little car so she can get to work. Because apparently, like, taking the trolley car or whatever in San Francisco was not getting her to work on time or whatever. And so they found this little VW Bug from somewhere and sent it to the maid as like part of the deal. But then, who we come to know as Herbie starts acting up because that's like not where he's supposed to be or whatever. And so he gets returned to the dealership. We don't know where they found Herbie before this. It's just part of the deal was that she was going to buy this luxury car, but we had to also find a car that she could, purchase from us that was like a cheap but reliable vehicle so her maid could get back and forth to work, which is such a weird story. Like, why couldn't it have just been like, well, I do racing and I won this in my last race and now I'm going to scrap it for parts or something. Like, fine, simple story. There you go. We're done. But instead, it's like this really elaborate story of like, some rich woman wanted a car for her maid and we found the car somewhere and like,
Yeah. The car accident, they send it back, and the car that we eventually know as Herbie kind of falls in love with Jim and then leaves the showroom and follows him home like a puppy.
oh, speaking of puppies, there is apparently a story, and I don't know if this is one of those like Disney legends they made up or if it's real, but like apparently in the original story that this is based off of, the type of car was never specified. It was just like a car. And so when it came time to do the movie, Disney kind of like, the Disney company kind of like auditioned quote unquote cars, and they brought cars in to see like how employees and stuff reacted to them. And apparently the employees kept wanting to pet the VW bug that was brought on. Like, they brought on like all kinds of cars from all kinds of manufacturers from all around the world, and like people kept like wanting to like pet the VW bug and like talk to it and stuff. And apparently they were like, okay, there's just something like that, people just anthropomorphize that over all these other cars. So I don't know if that's actually a true story or just one of those things that like Disney has turned into legend or whatever, but that is supposedly the story of why it ended up being a VW bug.
Okay, so that kind of goes into another point that I kind of forgot to talk about, is that this movie was based off a book that I cannot find any information of. Gordon Buford's 1961 book, Car Boy Girl, was the basis of The Love Bug, and I can find nothing about it. I cannot find a copy of this book. I cannot find any reviews of this book. It could be a situation, and Disney has done this before with like Dumbo. We talked about this when we talked about Dumbo, where they will buy a book like before it's even published and they just own the story. So I'm pretty sure this book was never published and Disney just bought the story.
The thing is that there is some suggestion that you are correct, because the thing is like apparently it was supposed to be a book. And there's like some things, when I was looking it up, I saw like a couple of different stories about this. One was that it was a short story. And that somebody at Disney saw it and immediately bought it. Some people say that it was supposed to turn into a book and Disney bought the rights before the book could publish and squashed the publication of the book, which is why nobody can really find anything on it anymore. I tend to think that the short story thing is probably more accurate, because, you can publish something in like, especially back then, you could publish something in like obscure magazine or whatever, and it could kind of just disappear, But the thing is that there is very little evidence that it was ever published. Some people say that it was published as a short story that has just been lost to time. Nobody knows what, where it was published, like what publication, ran it. Some people claim that Disney bought the rights before it was ever published anywhere. And nobody seems to have an actual copy of the original story. And the Library of Congress does not even have it in their copyright catalog.
Yeah, you would think, man. I mean, even with, like I said, we have some knowledge of the original Dumbo children's book. We have some of the information of the original Lady and the Tramp book, even the original Gremlins, the ones that did the unmade Disney version, not the 80s movie. Just to be correct on that one. So like we have all of these ideas. We have where these came from, what was the original story, and stuff like that. Even eventually the original Nightmare Before Christmas poem. So it's like we have nothing about this original book that became Herbie. So it's very weird. We don't even have any knowledge of the author. Like there's no digital footprint. The only credits this author has is this one short story and the Herbie movies. That's it.
Yeah.
For all we know, this all could be made up. Disney just made it up. This guy may not even be real.
Yeah. Who knows?
But anyway, back to the movie here. So the Herbie follows Jim home, and then we get a really interesting cameo. I didn't really want to talk about it in the cast because it's such a short role. Joey Ross, pretty much playing his character from Car 54.
Yeah.
He is. It's a cameo. It's short. And it's funny because Herbie's number is 53.
Yeah.
Not really worth mentioning, but I just want to talk about because it was a nice little joke in the movie.
Something that would have landed at the time that is kind of lost to time now.
Yeah. The point is that due to this shenanigans, Jim is kind of blackmailed into buying the bug because, hey, we think you stole this car from our showroom. You can buy the car at inflated interest, or you can go to jail. It's like, fine, I'll buy the stupid car. Herbie just has the same problems apparently the original owner did. The effects of Herbie being scared to go on the freeway, I'm kind of with you on, even by 1960 standards, these effects were not that good.
Though I totally feel Herbie for not wanting to go on the freeway.
Especially the LA freeway. You've been in LA traffic?
Yes.
Yes, I know that the first part of the movie takes place in San Francisco, but my point stands. But and he said, what's your game here? You tricked me into buying one of your cars, and then you rig it up.
I mean, the funny thing is that I want to know if Herbie is that scared of just going on like straightaway freeway, like just merging onto a freeway. I live in Georgia, and up in Atlanta, we got something called Spaghetti Junction. And if you don't know what that is, look it up. It lives up to its name and is more terrifying than you would think. It is one of those things that should not exist and was probably constructed in the pits of Hades. Yeah, no, Herbie would absolutely, throw a piston if he saw that, I think. But yeah, so that is, absolutely, one of the funnier scenes to me. As much as the slapstick doesn't always hit with me in this movie, I did kind of like him just being like, screw you, I'm not going on the freeway.
Yeah, and this does lead into, Carol's like, okay, I've seen you, like we mentioned, Carol knows who Jim is as a race car driver. I know how you drive. That's why the car is messing up, because you drive recklessly. Let me drive it and everything goes smoothly. Up until the point where Carol has to leave because she has a date with Mr. Banks. Dating your employee, sir. There's just probably, even by the 1960s, there should be some kind of legal issue on that.
Yeah, it's kind of scummy.
Yeah, but instead Herbie decides, Carol, you are going to go on your date, but you are going to go on a date with Jim, not Mr. Banks. This is why he's called the Love Bug, because it's a matchmaking story, it's a love story, I think.
I mean, that's what they tell us. Your mileage may vary.
Let's cut through some of the BS here. Well, I can't say it because it's a family-friendly episode. Let's kind of skip around here because we'll be here all day. Let's skip around here, and eventually Jim decides, this car can actually race, because in part of this Herbie going crazy thing, races a pair of teenagers in a hot rod and beats them. So, hey, this car can actually be pretty fast. Doesn't look it, but it is, and this is going to be my new race car. So this is where we get the Herbie look for the rest of the franchise. The racing stripes, the number 53, and Jim enters what the movie calls open formula racing, meaning there are no standardized cars. Everyone can just race whatever car they want. And Jim wins the race because, Herbie's a very fast car. And this starts the whole movie of Jim believing that he is winning on his own accord, when in actuality, Herbie is basically driving himself and winning the races on his own. That is kind of the plot of the movie here. That's the big thing.
With Tennessee giving him direction on exactly when to stay back, when to pull forward, when to give it all of the gas,
Because you don't want to make it obvious.
Well, and also it's Tennessee is acting like a coach for Herbie. Herbie has never raced before, so far as we know. I mean, we have no idea where Herbie came from. Who knows? But as far as we know, Herbie has never raced before. So Tennessee is acting kind of like his coach. Like, hey, you want to reserve your energy for the first couple of laps and then, give it a big burst of energy at the end, pace yourself kind of thing. And so he's like, not yet, Herbie, don't do it yet. Okay, now, Herbie, now, give it all you got now, and that's where, he comes in. And the thing is that Jim is either too ignorant or too narcissistic to realize, oh yeah, when Tennessee starts screaming hey, Herbie, do the thing now, all of a sudden I start going fast and I wasn't doing anything different.
I mean, he doesn't even put it all together until towards the end of the movie. So he thinks he's doing it under his own merit. And of course, at that race, Mr. Banks and Carol just happen to be there because that's their makeup date from missing the date in the previous scene. Their makeup date is going to this race, which Mr. Banks hates because it's a lower class race and he is sure. But seeing the car that he was going to scrap for parts actually win the race, he comes like, wait, how is this junker car winning the race? What did this guy do to this car? I want this car back because this car's a winner now. So a deal is made between the two saying, all right, Jim, I will allow you to enter the league. I guess there's a league, maybe, sure. And if you win the next race that I'm in, we'll wager the winnings against each other, basically. You win, then you give me the prize money, and that will cover the remainder of your payments on this car. This car will become 100% yours because he can, again, like I said, Mr. Banks gave him the car with inflated interest. So all interest paid off, car is yours, but if I win the race, then you give me the car back. That's the deal. And we get to the El Dorado race. At least they got an actual Mexican actor for that scene. Speaking actual Spanish, that scene could have gone. I mean, you talked about the Chinese later in the movie, but the Spanish and the fact that it's supposed to be closer to the border, not quite there, but borderline.
Yeah, they tiptoed right up to that line, but
just to, like you mentioned, this movie's montage. We get a whole montage of Jim winning races in this league with Herbie and getting wins, getting recognition. Hey, he's finally getting that fame he's always wanted as a race car driver. And it gives him enough confidence to ask Carol out on a proper date. Not just, hey, the car screwed up and we're at this diner. No, let's go on a proper date. To which Mr. Banks decides to take advantage of the situation. He originally tells Carol, hey, go out on a date with him and try to convince him to work for us because look how good of a driver he is. He wins races. I want him on my team under my employment because if he wins, I win and we make a lot of money. That is what he tells Carol. But in actuality, Carol is starting to warm up to Jim and actually goes on the date because she actually starts to like him. Okay. We got that out of the way. As this is happening, Mr. Banks shows up at Jim's place and tries to talk to Tennessee, trying to get to know him, try to get, what's your secret? What are you doing that's giving you this success?
Because he thinks they're doing something that's the equivalent of putting nitrous in the tank.
Cheating, basically.
Yeah, they got to be tweaking the cars somehow. He just doesn't know how.
To be a good host, Tennessee, offers him a cup of Irish coffee with a little alky in it. Sure. Tennessee's way of making coffee with a coffee pot and a blowtorch. At least he mentions that you have to be careful in doing such, but yeah, I don't recommend doing that, kids.
Yeah, and it probably makes really crap coffee too.
Yeah. But as this is happening, Mr. Banks decides to pour the cup of Irish coffee that he already has into the tank of Herbie, basically sabotaging Herbie. Because, hey, if I can't beat them on my own merit, I'm going to sabotage the car and win that way. And as Jim and Carol are on their date, Mr. Banks loans one of the show cars to Carol, say, hey, pick him up in this car. Again, as far as Carol knows, Mr. Banks wants to hire Jim as a driver. So butter him up with the show car. Makes sense. And he is desperate to drive this car because it's a, British, they're called muscle cars for a reason. We'll come back to this. As he says, a real car for a real man. Because he doesn't really feel like a man when he's driving Herbie. He wants to drive one of these muscle cars.
What a dweeb.
Yeah. I wonder if, you know what? I got to make the joke. I got it. Do you think people who drive a Cybertruck feel that way? Yeah, this is a real car for a real man.
Yeah. I mean, I think they did it first, at least. I don't know what they're thinking now.
But that's kind of the point, is that while Herbie is winning him races, it's not the car he wants to drive. He wants these expensive muscle cars, so that's kind of what he ends up doing later in the film. He uses some of his winnings to buy a muscle car, and he's going to get rid of Herbie because, I want to drive a real car. I want to drive a real car for a real man. That is the phrase he says in the film. But as it's happening, it's like, Tennessee is starting to the next race, Herbie completely loses because, again, there's coffee, there's whipped cream, and there's bourbon in the tank. So, of course, that car breaks down and loses the race. And you texted me as you're watching this scene. We're watching this scene, and you're texting me because as the car kind of backfires, it shoots the whipped cream right into Tennessee's sign. And, like, why is he licking it? Like, whipped cream just shot out of the exhaust of a car onto your sign, and your first instinct is to lick it.
Well, no, not whipped cream. A random white substance. He doesn't know what it is until he licks it. Like, he has no idea what it is. It's just a random white substance emerges from the car. It splatters onto the sign, and his first thought is, let me lick this and see what it is.
Yeah. So Jim buys a Lamborghini with his winnings because he wants to drive a real car in the next race. And like, Herbie gets jealous, like straight up jealous. And this is where Jim finds out that Herbie is sentient. Because, like, the car is straight up, like, how dare you? I got you to this point in your career and you're just dumping me for a younger model? How dare you? You are such a man.
Yeah, this is actually my favorite scene in the movie because there's just something awesome about watching a VW Bug just absolutely cream a brand new shiny Lambo, And I mean, Herbie goes ham on that thing too. Like, not really a dent on Herbie, but you don't want to see the other guy,
Yeah. And I love how he comes to that realization. Of course he's jealous. He's always been jealous because I'm getting the credit for his race. Oh, I understand, Herbie. So it's like, on some level, he's always known that. He just could never admit it because his ego wouldn't let him admit it, that the car won the race and not him. And Herbie runs away because, like, you're going to replace me after I got to this point. You call this thing a real car, and I'm done. I understand what they were trying to do with this scene, trying to make it all emotional. You didn't believe in Herbie, so Herbie doesn't believe in you, and just like to the point where Herbie tries to drive himself off a bridge.
Not just any bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah, like we got. I don't know if I could say the word, but yeah,
we got
a freaking
unaliving cars here.
Yeah, a car trying to unalive himself because his owner doesn't appreciate him. Oh, I hate that I had to say it that way.
Don't even know what this movie is. What even is this movie? Why did you make me watch this? I totally blame you.
Because we wanted to watch something from the classic Disney era, and this is one of the few ones that were actually popular that we haven't gotten to yet. I don't even know. So anyway, Herbie just is in a fit of jealousy running off, and this is where he crashes into the Chinese restaurant. gets impounded, and then the owner of the restaurant makes an agreement because Jim just spent all of his money on the Lamborghini, which is now totaled thanks to Herbie. He cannot pay for the damages that Herbie caused to the restaurant. So Mr. Wu kind of ends up getting the car, getting Herbie as compensation.
Well, yeah, they make the deal that if Jim wins the big race, which is a 2-day, endurance race thing, that Wu will keep the prize money, but he will agree to sell Herbie back to Jim for $1. And if not, then he'll get to keep Herbie, which was kind of their original, it was sort of adjudicated by the cop on the spot that they'd take the car anyway, because he was like, oh, I'll take the car in payment,
Yeah, and it turns out that Mr. Wu's a car buff. He's actually a fan of Herbie. Once Tennessee takes all the mud off the car and shows him the number 53. Oh, wait, this is the car I saw on TV. Yeah, of course I'm going to keep this car. But that is the deal, that Mr. Wu takes the car as payment for the damages that the car made to his restaurant and makes the agreement with Jim. So yeah, big race, the El Dorado Run for the Gold 2-day race, which I think is from Nevada to Southern California, I think.
Yeah, I don't really know. The funny thing to me about this race is that, we were talking about different cultural, and timelines and stuff. They kind of start this race with the guy running the race being like, there's too many rules in these here races. We've gotten all namby-pamby with rules and regulations. So now we're getting rid of rules because rules are for wusses. And I'm like, okay, don't know where that came from.
The car and the driver, the way it's supposed to be. And as this is going on, Mr. Banks is talking to Mr. Wu. All right, Mr. Wu, I know who you are. I know that you own several businesses. And hey, we're going to make a deal here. And as we find out later, the deal is basically if Mr. Banks wins, he gets Herbie. And if Mr. Wu wins, then he gets Mr. Banks' car dealership. Now, we don't find that out until the end of the movie, but that is the wager they made.
It turns out Mr. Banks is not good at reading the fine print.
But to ensure his victory, Mr. Banks cheats. He drains Herbie of his gas tanks, so they end up running out of gas much earlier in the race than they're supposed to. Their emergency tanks, he replaces it with water. He loosens the lug nuts off the tires so they fall out. He chops up the spare tire in multiple pieces. He is fighting dirty.
Okay, so here's my problem with this final section of the movie.
It's the final hour of the movie, or the final half hour of the movie.
Yeah, whatever it is. It feels interminable. Okay, so the first part of the movie, even though it's mostly montage, and honestly, this part of the movie is too. It's just longer montage. In the earlier races, a lot of the things that get solved are solved because Herbie is sentient and Herbie takes over and Herbie does what Herbie wants to do. And Jim just kind of goes along for the ride. And this final race, when kind of everything is on the line and you're like, all right, Herbie, show us what you got. Herbie does almost nothing.
Not until the final stretch. It's only during the final stretch of the race that Herbie takes over.
Yeah, I mean, eventually Herbie kind of does a thing, but for most of the final race, most of the problems are, Mr. Banks sabotages the team and the team figures it out and Herbie just acts like a normal car. There's no personality or idea of sentience to Herbie for that point of time. It's like Herbie lost a tire, so we have to counterbalance the weight to keep it on the other 3 tires so it won't ride on the rim. And it's like we ran out of gas, but here comes the, Deus Ex Machina team from Wu to carry us to the gas station because Wu won't let us be sabotaged like this. It's like, it actually has nothing to do with Herbie.
I mean, Wu has to protect his investment.
I mean, yes, it makes sense to the plot as some guys made a wager on a race. But the conceit of this movie is it's a sentient car. Theoretically, I'm watching this movie because it's a sentient car, not because I give a crap about two guys wagering on a race. I want to see the sentient car movie. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like they kind of forgot what their focus was there. Like, if you want to make a movie about, like, it's a tense, either tense or comedic or whatever your tone is, about two guys wagering on a car race and they keep sabotaging each other or whatever, make that movie. You can make that movie without having a sentient car. And in fact, half of that last act is that. It's just, what if Herbie were a normal car and they had to get through this race by their own merits? Okay.
We skipped over it, but I didn't mention it earlier, and I have to mention it before I forget it. There's a part earlier in the movie when Mr. Banks is kicking Herbie because it's an ugly car and it's such a low-class car for his high-class establishment that Herbie starts leaking oil on Mr. Banks's leg. And all I'm thinking is a certain scene from the Michael Bay Transformers movie, Bumblebee, please stop lubricating the man.
Yeah, it was the first thing I thought of too, and I hated that. I hate this movie for making me think of that movie.
I mean, if Herbie is acting like a puppy, you have a dog, so you kind of know. Has your dog ever peed on someone that they didn't like?
Nope.
Okay. And it's irony that both Herbie and Bumblebee are best known as VW bugs, though I don't think Michael Bay intended to make that reference. So yeah, with all the shenanigans, Mr. Banks wins the first day of the race. There's a lot of shenanigans here, and Mr. Banks wins the first day of the race. Herbie, after losing tires, after running out of gas, after all the shenanigans that Mr. Banks has pulled up, Herbie comes in dead last, and Herbie is completely shot. Everything in it is dead. They can't do anything. Like even Mr. Wu is saying, we're on the last page of the book story. Time to close the book. It's over. But as I said, this is where Herbie starts to realize that he's a sentient car and kind of refuses to quit. No, I will race. I will race tomorrow. I will not let Mr. Banks win. Why does this car not talk in this movie? Was that a step too far?
Who knows? I think because if the car talked, it would take away all ambiguity of whether or not the car is sentient.
We're not going with My Mother the Car here. How many old TV shows can I reference in the podcast? But yeah, we're at day 2. And because Mr. Banks wins, he is allowed a longer lead. Because Herbie came in dead last, he has that handicap, and he has to start late. Makes sense to me. But I mean, honestly, the rest of the movie is cars drive, cars drive, cars drive. That's kind of it. And then there's shenanigans, and then Herbie is going so fast that Herbie starts to literally tear itself apart. And Jim is trying to hit the brakes. It's not working. Herbie does not want to stop. Herbie refuses to lose, to the point where it's one of those, this is the scene of this movie I remember. There's 2 scenes of this movie I remember. One is Herbie doing the skipping stones thing over a river, and the other is this, where Herbie literally tears itself apart. That Herbie literally is torn in 2. They cannot weld the car fast enough as the car is tearing itself up. And yes, the car tears in 2, and the back half of the car, which has Tennessee in it, somehow is able to get faster than Mr. Banks's car and finishes the race first. And Gary Owens has the great call at the end of the movie, and the little car comes in first and third. I understand it's supposed to be a funny joke, but it's like, sure. That shouldn't make sense, but I'm also trying to make sense about a movie about a sentient car. But whatever. So yeah, Herbie wins the race. Yay. Jim gets the car back. Mr. Wu now owns, Mr. Banks's car dealership, and Mr. Banks, because he didn't read the fine print on the contract, now works for Mr. Wu as a mechanic. Yeah. Jim and Carol get married, and they don't know where their honeymoon is going to be because Herbie hasn't told them yet, and Herbie is going to drive them to wherever their honeymoon is going to be. The end.
And Herbie achieves auto drive decades before Tesla was even a car company.
As I said, this movie was successful enough to spawn, several sequels. In 1974, about 10 years after this, we would get Herbie Rides Again. 1977, Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo, which does have Dean Jones coming back for that. Herbie Goes Bananas in 1980. The Herbie the Love Bug TV show in 82. A TV movie that is part sequel, part remake in 1997. I've mentioned this before. There was this weird time in the 90s where Disney was just remaking all of their classic movies as TV movies. Dean Jones does make a cameo in the TV movie. Yeah, they tried to make the TV movie both a sequel and a remake, and Dean Jones makes a cameo in the movie. Yeah, sure. And finally, Herbie Fully Loaded in 2005, this Lindsay Lohan movie. And there was talk of another film or possibly a TV series in 2017, but that never went anywhere. And that's the Herbie franchise. Will we be coming back to the Herbie franchise? Probably not. But this is just another one of those, let's do classic Disney movies that we haven't done yet. Yeah. And I apologize to Kiki.
Thank you
on that
for the formal apology. I appreciate it.
Do I have to ask the question? I'm going to, though. Does Herbie the Love Bug have the magic?
I don't think so. I have no idea how this got so many sequels.
But there was a joke we skipped over. Do you want to do that?
Yeah, one thing before we finish, there is one joke in this movie that I was kind of surprised that Disney allowed through. And I guess it was because it was like so adult that maybe like it was only like, if you know, you know, and if you don't, you're never gonna get it. But there is a scene on after Herbie tries to do away with himself on the Golden Gate Bridge, two cops are talking and the younger cop says to the older cop, like, wow, that car saved that man's life. And the older cop's like, what do you mean the car saves a man's life? And the younger cop's like, I mean, things in the dense fog can sometimes look weird. So for a second I thought, but that couldn't be possible. Ha ha. And the older cop says, yeah, for a second there, I thought you were spending a little too much time down in the Haight-Ashbury district. Now, for those of you who are too young or too disconnected from your history to know, the Haight-Ashbury district was well known for its smoking habits, let's say. So that was his way of being like, it's not fog, it's smoke. That's making you see things.
Well, we do have not Cheech and Chong in this movie.
Well, yeah, but that's just like, you could just write them off as like random hippies. Mm-hmm. It's not like a direct, but like the Haight-Ashbury joke is like, Haight-Ashbury was known for two things. It was known for its smoking culture, to keep it PG-13, and it was known for its LGBT culture, okay? At this time, those were the two things you found in Haight-Ashbury. So he's either calling him one thing or the other. And I don't think he's calling him a member of the LGBT community. So yeah, that is the joke. And I was so shocked when I was there. I was like, well, maybe it was such a niche California joke then that Disney was like, nobody's going to get this anyway. And maybe just the people who were giving like the rating or doing the censoring didn't get it either, And that's why it got through. But I was really shocked to see that joke. I was like, that's a really adult joke for this era of Disney in a mainline Disney family film.
Yeah. So as for next week, Kiki, it's time. We have talked about this movie several times on this podcast. We have avoided talking about this movie for a very long time, and it's mostly because this movie is not available for streaming anywhere. So we're gonna bite down on it and actually sit down and watch it. He's so vain; he probably thinks we're talking about him. Kiki, it's time to finally watch Dick Tracy.
Well, at least it's another comic book movie.
Right. Yeah, and we're going to get into that. A movie that took like 30 years to make and really was made because of the comic book boom of the late 80s and early 90s. Well, so come back next week for Dick Tracy, and we'll talk to you all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Don't let the magic stop here.
Keep the conversation going. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads at Rewatching the Magic.
We are also on Blue Sky, rewatchingthemagic.bsky.social. And new episodes are available at rewatchingthemagic.podbean.com and youtube.com/@rewatchingthemagic. Remember, the magic is for everyone.
It only stops if you let it.
We know that right now, things are tough.
But in the words of Jim Henson, the only way the magic works is by hard work. But hard work can be fun.
Check out our show notes for ways that you can help.